All right.
People coming in. Welcome,
Wow.
welcome. Good
Welcome.
afternoon.
All right.
Hello, everyone.
Should have quite a few people today, so we'll wait for most of you guys to get in before we officially kick things off. But Happy New Year. Welcome back. Hope all of you are doing well, and thank you so much for joining.
Mm-hmm. Wow, a lot of people coming in.
Right?
Hi, everyone.
Thank you all for being on time.
Hello, everyone.
Wow.
Mm.
All righty. Happy New Year, everyone.
All right. Seems like people coming in has leveled off for a moment. So it is that time. Let's go ahead and kind of kick things off. Thank you all so much for joining. Congratulations on surviving 2020. Somehow all of us are still here. And that's kind of what inspires our little event today. This is going to be a look back and a look forward. So, again, thank you for joining. My name is Grant. I will be hosting things today, and with me we have quite a few very lovely panelists. Let's go through and introduce our gang of minds for today, starting with our very valued guest, Mr. George Goda, co-founder of Startup Accelerator 01 Booster. George, how are you today?
I'm very fine. So today I'm very happy to talk with you, and please enjoy today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're thrilled to have you with us.
Yeah.
Next up, from Trinidad and Tobago, and representing the Caribbean point of view, I suppose we'd say, Zia Holder, one of our trainers. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you very much, Grant. Again, Happy New Year to everyone. And it's a pleasure discussing all of these really interesting topics. So looking forward to a lively discussion.
Indeed. And so many topics we have today. Continuing on over, Anna Murray representing Ireland in today's discussion. Anna, thanks for joining.
Thanks, Grant, and Happy New Year. I'm so happy to take part in the discussion events. I love discussing complicated topics.
Fantastic. Hopefully our topics will not let you down on that. And last but certainly not least, our trainer and one of our directors, Raina Saiki, thank you for setting things up, actually.
Hi. Yes. Happy New Year, everyone. And thank you, Grant, for facilitating. I'm very excited for this discussion.
Absolutely. As a side note to all of our listeners who are joining in, please feel free to use the chat at any point to share your questions and your comments in English or Japanese, depending on what you feel comfortable with. Reina will also be keeping an eye on the chat throughout the discussion. So if there's anything you want to ask, and even if we cannot get to it directly within the discussion, feel free to post things up and Reina will be answering things, as well as giving some sort of English and Japanese summaries and highlights of topics as we go along. And my, how many topics we do have today. So many things to discuss from this last year, from the obvious with pandemics, work culture changes, pop culture changes, the catastrophic events in Australia, Brexit, all of the goings on around the elections and the personalities involved therein, the explosions in Beirut, hackings of Twitter, and the ongoing BLM protests and according societal unrest all across the world now. So many things to talk about. So let's start things off on something that will maybe only be mildly controversial, and something that I'm actually curious to get some opinions on as an issue I'm not directly involved with, to be honest. We're going to start by talking about Brexit, especially since we are lucky enough to have someone who is relatively closely related to the issue. So let me open with that. Anna, so Ireland remains a part of the EU, correct?
Yes, this is a really complicated one to talk about. A lot of people don't really realize the geography. Right? Ireland and Britain are two islands, but the north of Ireland is still part of the UK. So there is now a border between the EU and outside the EU on the island of Ireland now, which is a very significant event.
So what is the particular significance of that beyond just the obvious, it makes things more inconvenient?
Well, for quite a long time in Ireland, you may remember there was a civil war. Well, not a civil war, but there was what we call the Troubles, which was the Northern Ireland War between kind of Protestant factions, Catholic factions, or Unionist factions and Republican factions. But the Good Friday Agreement specified, which was what brought peace to Northern Ireland, specified that people in Northern Ireland could choose to consider themselves Irish, and there was free travel across this border, and that was very significant. We were all part of the EU, we all had free travel, and anyone who lived in Belfast could travel to the south of Ireland. Anyone who lived in the south of Ireland could travel north, and it was just a free and open border. The fact that there is now what people were worried about, a hard border between the two areas, is really significant for people who live there. You have towns who are across the border. You have people whose farmland goes across the border. And now all of a sudden there is a very significant border between those. So the concern is not just about goods crossing the border, but about a possible future inflammation of past tensions in the area.
Okay, so I think for most people, perhaps in Europe and especially outside of that, Brexit is often seen as very purely an economic issue. And so at least in the Irish case, there seems to be quite a lot of additional history and underlying social tension involved in that.
Right.
Okay.
For me, I always think of it as almost more of a cultural issue, even though I know most people internationally are looking at the economic impact, but you have to remember the amount of cultural exchange that happens within countries in Europe, especially because of open travel. And that open travel has now been taken away from a significant number of people, and people who identified as European are now feeling a little bit isolated, right? So it's not just an economic issue. It really affects how people view their own identity. It affects how they interact with people in neighboring countries. So it's a much bigger issue than just an economic issue for me.
Very interesting stuff. All right. So for those of us sort of on the outside looking in with respect to this issue, open to any of you, what are your takes on the situation as you see it, or does what Anna mentioned kind of mesh with what you had imagined regarding Brexit already? How do you feel about this issue?
Well, I think as an American, it's kind of like a far away. We read it in the news a lot, and it was, publicized in Japan as well. But for me, it was a very distant issue. But George, would you also agree that in Japan, Brexit was, like a major news economically in terms of global economy? But how did you feel when you heard that news?
Yeah, Brexit. Okay. So frankly speaking, UK and Japan is also the island countries. So very similar situation. So we understand the UK's mindset because, I'm very sorry, maybe you are globalist peoples, but I'm not a nationalist, but anyway, so to think about, for example, China, Korea, Taiwan, Japan, all Asian Union, that case is maybe we'd like to just, independent. So that case is we can understand, UK's situation. Sometimes I heard about, British people are a little similar to Japanese people, some mindsets. So I understand. And also last year, so economically, we are separating. So before the, globalization mainly we're thinking, but, last year and, we are more focused on each countries. So that case, maybe it is natural. So UK,
Okay.
Brexit, yeah.
George, let me play off that really quickly then. So you mentioned this idea of countries being separate as a natural thing.
Yeah.
Keep in mind, the UK is not a single country. So how
yes,
would you feel
exactly.
about also the like Scottish independence movements or things based on that?
It's maybe so. I'm not familiar with, but anyway, so this one is very difficult issue.
Fair.
And but from the maybe it's a very big issue. But I think basically a separate British Scottish may be big issue. But for my opinion, it's maybe better. But from the British people's view, to separation may be the reduce their country's power. So maybe they cannot accept. It's a very complicated issue. I understand. For example, from the Hokkaido, Japan, Hokkaido. If we are, Hokkaido independent, in that case, we are very afraid of the, Russia and China. In that case, maybe we do not agree to, Hokkaido's independence. Maybe it's the same issue for the, British people. Thank you. Sorry.
Okay, understood. Fair
Interesting.
point.
This actually, before we go on, there's a parallel here for me because during the 1950s, there was actually an organization, a union called the Federation of Caribbean States, or Caribbean Federation. And as you know, each island is now its own separate country. But back in the day, we were all kind of colonies, but there was a federation of about 10 Caribbean states. And Jamaica, this was in the 50s or early 60s, Jamaica broke away without informing anyone, but they decided to break away from the federation. And what happened is that Trinidad's prime minister at the time made a famous statement. He said 10 minus 1 equals 0. So a lot of times we think that, we wonder what's going to happen to the UK, but I'm also concerned about the EU itself. Is it self-sustaining? So that's something that is also a question.
So I guess the implication that you would see from that is this could be kind of a signal to other disgruntled member states that maybe the UN or the EU is not worth kind of retaining our partnership at this point.
Yeah, it's the first of a very large crack, perhaps.
Interesting.
Yes, but hello, dear. So I'm entrepreneur, so I love independent. My basic.
Fair. It worked out well.
Union is, I hate union. Just kidding.
I see that.
But George, would you agree that there is a power to uniting as well, to forming unions?
Are you sure? I don't like the union and big corporation. I love disruption.
You love disruption.
Sorry.
Oh, impassioned statements all around. Actually, Zia, I had a question that I wanted to sort of follow up with for you as well. I know Trinidad has historically pretty close ties to Britain, correct? What is the general atmosphere of people there like regarding Brexit, or does anyone really care that much?
I think a lot of people don't actually care. They're not particularly concerned, but when it comes to other sectors, like let's say our agriculture sector that's still export to Britain and the UK, perhaps there are concerns there. So yeah.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, this is one of those issues that is certainly not going to go away anytime soon. I think we just got the official announcements of withdrawal just within the last couple of weeks or something. There was an update on all of this.
The official deal for leaving, as they called it, was only reached just before, right down to the wire, before they officially left. So that is the main update that happened recently.
So, and an ongoing and developing situation, as it were, then. Interesting. Any thoughts or ideas that I have not directly touched upon yet on this topic anyone would like to bring up?
Well, I think I would just like to offer a counterpoint to Zia's point. I think I have seen the potential for the opposite happening, whereas this might not be a crack, but a warning to what happens when you leave the union. So there are so many issues in the short term and the long term that are potentially look very serious, right? And I think it has really put off, especially countries that have a weaker economy, it has put them off leaving the EU and have realized what the strength of being in the union is. I think especially for its buying power, for example, the UK was one of the first countries to start vaccinating against COVID-19, but it also wasn't part of the EU's purchasing bloc. So paid more, for example, as far as I'm aware, I think that's correct. So I think especially now, given the upheaval in the world, in the markets and in every other way, right, to our lives, I think this is almost maybe doing the opposite.
That's a fair point. I have seen some dire circumstances for the UK since Brexit has happened. A lot of them being discussed at the end of last year.
Right.
Yeah, so I can see where you're coming from.
Yeah, that is a very interesting counterpoint there. All right. Keeping that in mind, I think the consensus here seems to be that there are a lot of very clear losers in the situation with Brexit. Let's kind of shift our focus a little bit. And one of the biggest obvious winners from the mess that has been 2020 has been the greater sort of tech industry. With the shifts in work styles and sort of necessity of isolation that the pandemic has brought about, it has definitely fueled the expansion of a lot of companies focused on this sort of industry. Everything from the e-commerce to online payment platforms, video conferencing being another obvious recipient. So again, opening this up to everyone, two parts of this first question. First off, in terms of your relationship with technology, what is the biggest change that you've personally felt this year or last year? And then related to that, what do you think is the most meaningful, lasting impact for tech companies in particular and just the business sphere as a whole?
Big questions.
It's true, yes. So let's start with the first one then and break it down a bit. So how has 2020 personally changed your relationship with technology?
For me, I'll just say my relationship with e-commerce has become way more dependent. Yeah, there's a lot of buying going on online, especially when there were scarcity of certain items and things like that. So I'm sure there are a lot of other answers, but one thing that I really noticed was my dependence on e-commerce.
And so I'm reading that you are sort of positing that as a bit of a negative. Is that your intention there, or?
Am I? No, I'm just stating a fact.
Okay, fair enough. I was reading too much into the implication of that word dependence. Okay, fair. So we've got one vote for a dependence on e-commerce. Understood. George, Anna, Reina, what do you guys think? Has 2020 changed your relationship with technology? And if so, how?
Yeah, first, I'm sorry, George. So that case is the first is our remote. So everything online. So, at first is that we like to offline meetup and offline conference, offline event, but everything go to the online. And also that case is my schedule is full. 30 minutes from the morning 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. Every 30 minutes I have a conference call. That is completely changing my life and my city. Yes, and also my technology, everything is different. So the TV camera and everything. I have a lot of gadgets.
Okay, so let's go back to this element of your schedule, because I think that's a very interesting point. So what I'm getting from that is it's more things, but each one takes up a smaller span of time. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, so what's your reaction to that? Overall, is that easier than it used to be? Is it more efficient but more stressful? Like what's your emotional response to that schedule shift?
Very good question. Is enough. But I frankly speak the both. So
Okay.
I'm just stay here. So that case very easy, relax. But my brain is very, very stressed because every just 30 minutes and changing every day, 40 people I speak. And every people is a first met. So that is very, very stressful, my brain. But my body is relaxed. It's
Okay.
great. Yeah.
Interesting. So the mind-body duality. All right. So given that, do you have any advice for everyone listening for how to sort of control that mental stress?
Yes, this is a very good question. That case that we love chatting, chat. So that is for this one, today is very casual, but this one is in case basically official. But for example, I just chatting some people is a very not a business issue. This is very important. And also, this one is very not technology. Walk around and just relax to see the trees and not nature. It's very good for my health. Not drink alcohol.
Interesting. I may have gone the opposite direction with that one.
Yes, I stopped alcohol maybe 2 months.
Wow.
Wow.
Congratulations.
Good for you.
Yes, everybody, I believe you increase alcohol.
Yeah, I think so. Okay, that is an interesting recommendation. And I do certainly agree with the get up as much as possible. I think it's really a lot easier than I ever would have anticipated to forget how long you sit in the same place every day. Okay. Anna, what about you? What do you think? How has your relationship to your technology changed?
Well, I might be in the minority here, but actually it hasn't changed at all.
Oh, do tell.
Before I came to Japan, I always worked freelance. I always worked remotely. I've never actually worked in an office. I've always worked from home, and I've always done everything through email and, Skype, or before it was Zoom. So this actually hasn't been a significant change for me. The one thing that is different, I think, as George mentioned, I used to meet people for coffee every now and then, and that was always a very good creative space for hashing out ideas. And I do miss that a little bit because it's hard to get the same kind of atmosphere, the same bouncing back and forth of ideas sometimes if you're not face to face. But really, in terms of my actual way of working, apart from the SparkDojo lessons going online instead of in person, there actually hasn't been that much difference for me.
Okay, very interesting. Let me play off that a little bit then. You've mentioned that most of your background is various types of remote working. Is there anything different that you notice about the style or the implementation of remote working in Japan versus in Europe?
It's a little bit hard to tell for me, just because the nature of the work I used to do, because I was a concert promoter and I worked in music, which is a very, maybe a more informal kind of situation. You're not dealing with other companies and big structures. You tend to be dealing with one-on-one with artists or with musicians or promoters. So there's very little formality in that world. But I haven't really experienced that in the same way in Japan yet, because I'm not doing the same work here. So I find it a little hard to know if that is true of other areas of work.
Okay, that is actually a very interesting point as well. Reina, anything you would like to add about your relationship to your tech?
I mean, it's changed a lot significantly. I think I'm much more dependent on technology now that we're fully remote working. And as George says, I'm a lot busier, which means, yeah, again, I'm really dependent on technology because I don't think I can do a lot of the work that I'm doing without it. And I'm specifically dependent on a lot more different kinds of software and apps that have either existed before COVID that I've never used or have recently been launched or developed. So that's been something new for me.
Okay, interesting. So it sounds like all of us have seen, at the very least, maybe a re-evaluation of our relationship, even if maybe in some cases it hasn't drastically changed as much. So let's shift back to where I started with and talk about more of a macro picture here. And specifically, George, I'm curious to hear what you have to think on this, because you have a lot of experience and a lot of background working with startups and tech-related companies. Here's the way I want to ask this. Do you think the pandemic will become kind of like a bubble for tech companies, or do you think they'll be able to continue to ride this into the future and will still kind of be on an upward trend, even maybe once everyone reduces their remote working?
Okay, so that's a good question. Thanks so much. So, about the tech startups, of course, there is, winner and loser. So we are discussed with the venture capitals, many times. So that case, they advised, the amount of investments not decrease, still keeping or some points increasing. That case, investment money itself is, still similar or increasing, but depend on the startup. For example, technology for the travel is a very bad time now. But compared to that, education, e-commerce, and also other stuff is, for example, food, food technology, and also biotechnology and healthcare is now become boom. So you mean my image, startup is I think that 2 or 3 years it becomes a one kind of bubble, but still it increasing because there is no growth category. Only startup can grow in future, but other stuff, for example, retail is okay, but for example, real estate, other stuff is increasing, but compared to startup, it's a very small growth rate. So that case, bubble for the startups is key for a while. I mean, this is my opinion. Yeah.
Okay, very interesting. So you mentioned things like biotechnology and some of these industries. Do you think there are any other industries maybe in the near future that will see drastic changes, or will it just be a kind of continuation of what we've seen now?
Of course, many technology will be changed dramatically. For example, it's not only the one technology. For example, AI, artificial intelligence, the key technology. For example, we are communication with each other on a remote now, but it's a little difficult because we can see only a voice and an image. In that case, we lack of the information. For example, the movement of my legs, and we are only at 2D. So that case, this one is supplemented by the supported by AI. So that case is AI and the voice recognition technology is a communication technology itself is increasing. Will be the become boom. And also, now is the other stuff with food and everything. So we can see many directions. For example, SAS, and we can see a lot. Now is investment is sharp because all of the central bank providing a lot of money to the world. Now is in a bubble.
Okay.
I love bubble because entrepreneur. but I'm lack of money. Something.
All right. Related to that, having worked with a lot of startup companies specifically, I think some amount of the boom in tech companies is arguably kind of down to just luck in this situation, right? Since we're all working remotely, that's just what we all happen to really need right now. But setting aside the nature of the product itself, do you think there's anything unique to startups or tech companies and maybe the way they think that has helped them be so successful in this situation?
That's a good question. In that case, everything has a both side. everything we both sides. For example, the pandemic is a, maybe you understand, pandemic, and I'm barely so this is a, 4 point change the world. So
Okay.
this is one is a war, unfortunately war, and second one is like a bankrupt of the country and a revolution, and fourth one is a pandemic. In that case, pandemic is a completely changed the world. That case, this is the moment of the startup. I learned the moment in the GIA class. Thank you.
Aimless plug.
There you go.
So the moment, just to confirm my understanding, the moment of startups is this sort of rapid kind of change, this a little bit of a chaotic environment.
Yeah, chaotic. For example, US is also similar and Japan is also similar. After World War II, so there's many companies. For example, in Japan, case Sony and Honda. This chaotic situation is the best for the startup. Of course, most of people is go away, but some people win.
Okay, that is.
I wanted to ask, actually, George, what do you think about the real estate industry? I know you mentioned it before, but in this chaotic time, we've all gone indoors. But let's say within the next 12 months, we will be reorganizing the world and people will start working with different styles and patterns again. Do you think there's an opportunity in the real estate industry for innovation, especially considering that the almost IPO from WeWork crumbled about 2 years ago?
It's a very good question, I think. So, of course, some, some, you mean the real estate industry? Yes, okay. Understood. Okay, so maybe you understand that many companies, they resign the, office now. So they move to the WeWork and also, some of the co-working space. That case, real estate is now we are changing the, maybe Japanese or other country has a subscription model of housing. Before we buy the housing or we buy the apartment, but now we change the subscription mode. That is a big change for the real estate. But in case of real estate, basically our world is bubble. Most of money go to the real estate. So Japan and also Hong Kong and other real estate stuff is including their value itself. But other point, technology change the point, sharing, and this one old style is bubbling, and other style the sharing two economies are happening, I believe.
Oh, okay. So two separate economies are
yeah. So
now.
this one is both is very strange, but one is bubble by the a central bank. Other stuff is a technology.
Okay, very interesting. So something emerging there.
Yeah.
Yep.
Something I had definitely not considered. A unique take indeed. All right. Other comments, thoughts, questions? Anything anyone else would like to ask or add on the subject of the shifting and surging tech industry and our new pandemic lives? Any other questions? By the way, have we had any questions coming in from the audience?
No, actually.
Okay.
I've been the one talking a lot on chat. So we have a lot of people. Feel free to send in questions. We want to
Absolutely.
hear your opinions as well about what we're discussing. These are very interesting topics. So feel free, even if it's just to me, to send me a chat and tell me what you think.
All right. So before we move on, one other point here, talking about tech and just that general industry and relationship, we've been focusing mostly on startups, but I think it's also important to consider how established industries are maybe using this as an opportunity to reevaluate their relationship with technology and even work styles and other things. So, and George, I'll start with you again from this. What do you think is the necessary mindset for a large company to be successful in times such as this? We mentioned this is the moment for startups, but you can't just ignore the big companies as well. How do they succeed?
Good. Thanks so much. Goodbye. Good question. So, of course, it depends on the country. So Japanese big corporation or US or UK is, big corporation, completely different.
Okay.
In case of Japan, I think this one, digital transformation, so it's very common. Frankly speaking, Japanese big corporation are a little behind. In that case, they need a mindset to, collaboration with a completely different people, different, culture. This is a big, important for the Japanese corporation. And other country, for example, US and other country is almost similar, but Japan is a little behind. And other country and US and UK is maybe a little advanced. But to think about China, we need to learn from. Yes, I'm not sure that you like or not China, but anyway, so China's big corporations, frankly speaking, excellent.
Okay, what do they do?
Yes, they of course depend on the company.
Sure.
Yeah, for example, big corporation, especially the new company, their mindset is almost startups. So they love to progress, they love to learning. So that case, frankly speaking, we need to learn from the Chinese, for example, Alibaba or Tencent. Their mindset is maybe the one of the world standard.
Interesting.
Or be a world standard.
I suspect you can't answer this, but do you have any ideas on where that mindset comes from, and why are they able to do something that's so unique among big companies?
Oh, good question. This is my opinion.
Sure.
For example, Japan is a company has the founder. For example, the SoftBank. SoftBank is a big corporation in telecom. They have Son Masayoshi-san. He's a founder. And as a Japanese company, for example, Densan Nihon Densan or as a Uniqlo, they have founders. Yes, still founders. But other companies, all the founders are dead or they change. But if they have a founder, every decision can make quickly. But if there's no founder, so that is very difficult to judgment. So still, Chinese company has a founder. For example, Alibaba has Jack Ma. Jack Ma is maybe the one big high position. It's big point. They can decide, but Japanese company it depends on the company. But for example, they do not have a founder. That case, it's very difficult decision making.
Okay.
So it's about age then. Is this about the age of companies and the?
It's yes. And also, but if aged company, but it's a family owned, it's very good.
Interesting.
For example, Germany company. Germany company is basically the family owned. Of course, the Germany company has a problem, I believe, some problem, but still better than Japan. Maybe they are family owned.
Interesting.
So they can see the more long term, but very, if they are not, just employed CEO, that case they just think of very short term, just 4 months, 2 or 3 years. Yes.
So you mentioned that having a founder is very important and whatnot. Does that influence how you act as the co-founder of a company?
Oh, me?
Yeah. You are also a founder. Does that have an influence on your action?
Yeah, founder is frankly speaking, very strong. Yeah, very strong. We are not dictator, but we are very gentle.
Okay.
But anyway, so we can decide everything. Of course, we are think about the people and our teams, everything, but we can decide sometimes very difficult decision. Yeah, it is sometimes not good. I'm not sure as your company do that, but anyway, I say founder is very strong. But if founder is a bad, company become bad.
Okay. If the founder is bad, the company becomes bad.
Yes.
Interesting point.
All
right. So let's shift our focus again here to another topic, and I think maybe one that is Well, I suspect in Japan people are aware of it, but it may not be as front and center as it has been in many other places in the world. And I will warn people in advance, this could get a little bit heavy. We're going to switch down to the Black Lives Matter protests. And for a bit of background to anyone who might not be aware, this is a worldwide series of protests against basically systemic inequality and especially police brutality that was started after a couple of very high profile killings of African American people by police in Minnesota and in Kentucky, not very far from my home. That has led to quite the noted global movement. And I believe, Zia, there have also been some actual demonstrations in Japan as well, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's correct.
So there is at least an element of representation, I suppose, visibility, even in Japan, but it may be something that, as I said before, is not as front and center in Japan as it has been in specifically the US. So Zia, I'll start with your side here. As a participant in some of these events, what's your take on the subject? And I suppose, what is your mindset or your sort of driving emotion as someone directly participating in a lot of these things?
Great question, Grant. I think that understanding and communication between cultures is the key to having a really good society. And a lot of times that understanding isn't there, and there's no attempt to bridge the gap. So I think Black Lives Matter was a reactionary movement, definitely, to a lot of things that were and still are happening in the US. But it's also a movement about sort of giving a voice to people who, because they are not in the upper realms of economic life, don't actually have a voice to express what they feel and what they've been experiencing generationally. So I think that's kind of what the movement means overall to me. And then over here in Japan, a lot of people question, well, why should there be activities in Japan? And I actually did participate in one of these marches last year, socially distanced, wearing my mask. But I think one of the things that's interesting about what happened in Japan is that it wasn't a protest. We weren't protesting any activities or actions here. It was a march of solidarity to show that there were people who understood what the Black Lives Movement was trying to do. And I think it's really important to show support all around the world.
Actually, that brings up another interesting point. Kind of piggybacking off of that idea of solidarity and worldwide support. Again, this is ultimately a movement that started based on events in the US and is in a lot of ways specifically related to ongoing issues in US culture, politics, all kinds of things. But what do you think should be the learning or the takeaways from the rest of the world from these kinds of movements? What value is there to be gained from that for people who are not involved in that sort of very US-based atmosphere?
Yeah, that's great. I think there are lots of populations around the world who do not get the things that they deserve or they're entitled to or they have the right to. And I think the takeaway from this is if you organize yourself and you give yourself a voice, there are things that can be achieved. A lot of people kind of have some criticism with the Black Lives Matter movement because it's actually not a centralized movement. So there's not a guy leading the charge. It's several factions around the US and then, of course, supporting organizations around the world. However, there is a level of organization, and it has done more to ameliorate or make the position of African Americans better within the last 5, 6, 7 years. Black Lives Matter is not like a recent movement. It's new, but it's not recent. And I think it has achieved quite a bit. So I think the takeaway is community organizing, grassroots organizing, standing up for a cause, that kind of thing. I think it's really a good thing to take away from the movement.
Okay, that's actually a very interesting point. And I guess to bring that down to a very concrete level then, do you have any suggestions for people who might want to get involved with something? Not necessarily Black Lives Matter, but as you said, any sort of movement like this. What should people do?
Oh, that's a good question. So the first thing is, of course, research. There a lot of these topics and a lot of these issues are heavy, complicated, and really historically motivated issues. So learning as much as you can about what interests you is the first step. And then the second step is support through funding. So a lot of times we have a saying, money talks and expletive walks. So, right. So giving support financially is great, but the way the world works now, you don't give something for nothing. So there are ways that you can support financially, like supporting businesses or, buying products or trying to engage in fair trade with, communities that do not get good things for their raw materials. So there are ways that you can give and get double the value. And it's, again, money is really important for any movement. So I think that is one of the ways that you can really lend your support.
Donating. We do have a comment from Mr. Hayato. Thank you for your comment. Hayato says, Black movement has been strong at least before 1860s during the Lincoln era, and Japanese Americans used to be treated the same way in 1940s when Japanese people or Japanese Americans were put into concentration camps during the wars, the World War II in the US. So Japanese in the US are maybe also used to a different kind, maybe even a similar kind of racism as well.
This is an interesting point because it plays to some of the weird prejudices in the US about like the ways that different minorities are treated as well.
Absolutely. I think.
No, go ahead.
No. Well, the U.S. has a very long and sordid history regarding race, and Hayato makes a good point. It's been here for a long time, and not just against certain races, but to many races. And George, I think maybe I'd be curious to know your opinion about Black Lives Matter. It was covered a lot in Japan too, and I think many people are aware. But as Zia said, some people might not know exactly how to support. They might not feel like they can be involved. But what was your reaction to it initially?
Okay, and thanks so much for your questions. BLMs are a little difficult to understand of Japanese to reality. Japan has, of course, in Japan is also some of the discrimination for especially, I'm very sorry, but for the Korean immigrant and also before the Chinese and everything. But basically, we are a little bit surprised because such a big, a big action or big, heat up, like not a terrorism. I'm not sure in the English, but anyway, so such a big, a collision is happened. So, but I'm sorry.
Sorry. A big collision.
Yeah. So that case, but I'm also learn. I'm frankly speaking, I have just one question back. I recently saw the movie of the UK. Yeah, UK and the US is for the Japanese. I'm very sorry, but similar. I believe completely different. Maybe Tokyo, Osaka is more completely different. Yeah, so that case, but in UK, people and black people and white people are more mixed and understand each other. But why US case such stuff has happened? I'm sure the UK has the same stuff, but why US is so such collision is happening? Just one question. So that's the difference.
Yeah, I think
Maybe very critical issue. So
No, it's a
that's
great
Interesting
question.
question. Yeah.
question. Yeah. Grant, I know you can speak to this a little bit as well, but what I'll say is that the US is a great social experiment that started however many hundreds of years ago. And so unfortunately, lots of things that were going on were quite unusual for the world at that time and still to this day. And so it put many, many people of different cultures all together to kind of craft a nation. And it's unusual, it's in the new world. Whereas the UK is in the old world as we know it. And, the UK predominantly held their territory. And so anybody coming in sort of had to deal with a certain situation, but there was no free form land territory that could be grabbed or usurped. New industries, evolving as quickly as they did in the US during similar times. So I think there is a difference with how people, I think their mindset was very, very different in the two different countries.
You've got an interesting point there that just occurred to me, but I think taking specifically the example of the US versus the UK, distance, I feel, plays a big part of it, because you do see incidents like that happen in history in the UK, but they happen in the colonies, not in the UK proper. If you look at like partition in India in 1946, like that's a debacle. But again, it's very removed from the actual mainland goings on. I'm not going to try and sort of call any cause or effect based on that, but I think that there's more of an assumption, at least, of a oneness in the US that does lead to more direct conflict.
Right, and that's really important. What you say there, Grant, direct conflict, because even though there appears to be some kind of difference within Britain and the UK, and Anna, maybe you can speak to this more than me because of your proximity, but there is definitely still strife there. It's not milk and honey, not the land of milk and honey.
Right. I was actually just about to say, I'm really surprised to hear everyone saying that the UK is some sort of conflict-free zone. This is not my experience at all. I mean, you are right in that there is maybe a greater level of some integration because of, say, movement from the Caribbean or from other places during the colonial era. But the nature of the conflict in the UK is different to the nature of the conflict in the US. But when we were talking earlier about the effect of Black Lives Matter movement in the UK, I feel it's really about not so much addressing instances like there have been in the US, but Britain's colonial past, right? So you saw the removal of statues of slave traders, for example. So these are older issues, but they are so ingrained. You're looking at a country whose whole industry, whose whole existence is built on colonialism and slavery, right? These things are less on the surface, as he said, maybe less a direct conflict, but they still need to be dealt with. And especially when we're talking about like institutional racism, right? It's still a major issue in the UK, and you see it all the time. I think even recently I was watching a news interview about something, I can't even remember. And there was a Black British woman talking about something, and the interviewer basically said, why don't you go back to your own country, right?
Ooh.
This is a British woman. So these things are, they manifest differently in the UK and the US as a result of their past and of maybe kind of cultural differences. But there's no less of an issue. I think the reckoning that is happening now is taking a different form, but it is no less happening, I hope, in the UK. I was also going to say in Ireland as well, I mean, is obviously historically a colony as opposed to a colonial power, but is very multicultural now. And I think everyone always thought that, say, racism was something that happened somewhere else. And the Black Lives Matter movement and the protests that happened in Ireland have helped make Irish people reckon with their own prejudices quite a bit, and the experience of people from other backgrounds who live in Ireland now, which is very positive. But there is still a long way to go, even in these places where you think it's quiet, or you don't think it's an issue. Like these are things that really need to be discussed, right, and need to be brought up. And that is something that the movement has done this year, which is very positive, I think.
Okay, yeah, a lot of very valuable insights there, and that is an interesting point, and I've never put it together in exactly the way you worded it, but it makes sense that kind of the way you don't see the UK dealing with this in the same way as the US does, because it's just it's the same issue, but it's a different issue, if that makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. It's
manifests.
the same issue, different ways.
Yeah, that is very interesting.
I'm actually also just going to bring up something that happened in Ireland this week, was that there was a police shooting of a Black man in Ireland. And this is incredibly rare in Ireland because most of our police are not armed. And so this, as you said, is a rare instance. I don't know much about it, being here and not there, but it's a rare instance of where we see these things colliding. And all of a sudden, the issues that we thought were far away are suddenly not far away anymore. And this is a significant change.
That, I think, is actually maybe the biggest individual theme that I would draw out from this whole discussion. That idea that I think a lot of us have always assumed that these are issues that are very far away. And all of the events of the past year, I think, have probably made us feel that is probably a lot less true than we may have initially assumed.
I'd be curious to know, because George, you mentioned early on in this discussion that BLM was a little bit difficult for Japanese people to understand, and Grant mentioned the fact that this does still feel a little bit far away as an issue for some people, I think. But do you think that mindset is changing within Japan? The ideas toward race are changing in Japan?
Yes, I think so. Mindset of Japan is a little bit changed, but still Japanese is very, how to say, one of not single, but we are a little bit single-less country. So still, we are very difficult to understand such issue. Whether, for example, the people to go to the SparkDojo maybe learn such issue. So that makes everything changed. But still, I believe it's a little difficult for Japanese to understand such situation, especially US is we are look at many times. But for example, Europe is for Japanese very difficult to understand. Yes, US is a little bit simple. Not simple, of course complicated, but it's simple. But Europe is very complicated. So that case, we may be very difficult to understand such racing issue in Europe. I'm a little off the story, but anyway, so
okay,
changing, but still it's very difficult. Yeah.
So if I may, based on that, then, as you said, a lot of these issues, especially in Europe, can feel very far away, very different. Is there anything that you do to keep yourself informed or to challenge yourself with new perspectives or new ideas? George? Or anyone else for that matter?
Yeah, I think I Yeah. George, should I just repeat the question?
Sure.
Is there anything
Sorry,
you
thank you.
do to remain aware of, these issues, or to continue to learn about them? Because sometimes it's just about not knowing about different races or different cultures. Is there anything in particular you do to gain more knowledge
Okay,
about?
yes, it's a good question. So of course it depends on the people. Japanese has many peoples, but for me, for example, Hayato Ogasawa, Mr. Hayato Ogasawa says, in Japan, Korean and other Mandarin has been treated very badly for 1,000 years. It's very, not good issue, but it's a, very famous issue. But most of Japanese people do not know such an issue, frankly speaking. So we need to learn more about, the other country and such issue more. And, but most of Japanese has a, not Korean issue, but other stuff. We don't have many, interest to the other countries. So, but in the future, our country may change because, now is a pandemic area. So that case we are not, know about the other country, but after the COVID, maybe we need to learn more. So that case, such issue is very important for us because we are lack of knowledge at this point at all. So we try.
Yeah, that's a good point. Do you think the pandemic has made some countries more kind of closed a little bit?
Okay, at this point, I believe is that every country are separate. So for example, now I'm not sure that where you are. Now everybody in Japan or some people from the island or GIs from tornado, the country. But anyway, so some portion need, we can understand the other countries more because, we can, distance is now is a disappear. But most of the other parties may be, separate from the other countries. So maybe each country has a big problem, almost similar stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. No country is perfect with, free of racism, free of any kind of issue or problem. I wish there was, but that would be unnatural, actually. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you all for your thoughts on that. Let's move on to something hopefully a little bit more positive. We're getting down into the last third of our series for today. And what I want to do is shift things and look forward a bit more. So we've spent a lot of time focusing on what happened in 2020. Let's talk about next year, this year, whatever, the things that have yet to happen, where it is nothing but potential and hope and whatnot. And let's start by focusing very specifically on Japan, because as was just pointed out, that is where we all are now, wherever we may be from. So the first question, the obvious question, are the Olympics actually going to happen? What do people think? And do you care anymore?
Hot topic.
Do they happen? Will they happen? Should they happen? And do you still care?
I think we will have an event, but it's not going to be the Olympics. It's going to be the Olympics.
Shots fired.
Because something is going to happen, but I don't know if it's going to have the true spirit of the Olympics, which is all about just people coming together and competing and enjoying, all of that. So that's what I think.
Okay. Any differing opinions on that?
George, what do you think about the Olympics?
Oh, me?
Yeah.
I'm an entrepreneur, so I'll listen. So
We know, George.
Yes, but most of Japanese, I believe, 60 or 70% Japanese, they do not like to open their Olympic in summer.
That high?
Yes, frankly speaking, this is a silent majority.
Wow.
But some of the people, the government or Tokyo government, or maybe they need Olympics. because of some of the money issue. So, but it's very difficult. Most of people do not know everything. So some people know everything. So, in my opinion, so we need to, but we change a little bit. We need to hold the Olympic, but no audience. Maybe this is the best way so far.
Okay. So hold the games, but just like live stream everything or something?
Yeah,
Okay.
sure.
Okay.
Yes.
That is certainly an option.
Fully virtual event.
Zia, how do you think that that relates to your idea about the spirit of the games?
I actually think that sounds like a good alternative where you have a very sterile run of the games, but people still get to see, the various sports and, people get to compete and things like that. I mean, I think that's a viable option because we're all home anyway.
This is a fair point.
Yeah, it's a bit difficult with the pandemic, and Yoko has shared her view on chat. It is difficult to hold Olympics and Paralympics, I think. I do not think the vaccine for coronavirus will be ready. It would take more time, and therefore it might impact the games. Yeah.
I agree with Yoko, actually. It's one of the tosses, one of the reasons that I really actually stayed in Japan for quite a while is because I was very excited to be in a city that is hosting the games. Like I'm an ultimate Olympics fan, my family we used to pile in front of the TV and just watch it for a month. Great. So I'm distressed, but I also agree with Yoko. It's really not a good time.
I think as well you're in danger of only allowing, say, the countries that have been vaccinated, for example, to take part.
Right.
You're already creating additional inequality in who can take part, who can travel, who has the support to do that, whose country is able to support them. I mean, it becomes a real minefield, even if you're not having spectators. Just sending a team will be a real minefield, I think. And I think it could really lead to some, I don't know, unpleasant consequences, some ill feeling, I think, among people as well. It feels to me more fair to postpone it another year.
Postpone, to delay it.
Right.
Yeah. But George, you are of the opinion that we do need to have the Olympics. Are you concerned maybe about the economic impact?
Yes. So one big point is yes, economic impact, but now is I believe very difficult time, especially Japanese government said we will have a Olympics. That case, it is very difficult to change their mind. So economic issue is one point, but other point is government issue. So we can't change. So we need to vote next in future. But so far, government we can't change. So it's a very political issue.
Yeah, absolutely.
Interesting thought. All right. Actually, let's use that as kind of a springboard here. You mentioned the economy, and that's the next kind of subtopic I want to look into. What do you think lies ahead for the Japanese economy throughout the course of 2021? Is there a chance for a miraculous recovery? Are things going to kind of continue as they are, or are we heading back into the early 90s? Any thoughts from anyone on maybe whether or not the Japanese economy will bounce back and how they might be able to do it?
Yes, just dramatically down.
Okay, that's a definitive answer.
But the Japanese, Bank of Japan providing a lot of money, so virtually stable. But actually completely down. But Japan need a reform. So our systems, our systems made in the Meiji period more than 150 years ago. So that case, we need a reform. That is a one good chance for reform the Japan. So dramatically, that may be necessary to think from the future.
Okay. Dramatically reform meaning what? What needs to change?
Oh, so one point is, human resource. So many people is, are stuck in the big corporation or government or somewhere. So, but many people is talented. So they need, more focus on the new product, new industry. That case is we need push some people to go out from the companies. So that is one point. And the other reform is a system. System itself is too old, but it's very difficult, reform. So that case, we need maybe the, falling power. Yes, Japan is very difficult to reform than ourselves. We change by the, for example, US or the other countries' power, so that we need maybe other countries' power. Yeah.
Why do you think it's difficult for Japan to reform itself?
Oh, in our history, such never happened, such stuff. In the maybe from the 3,000 years. At first, China or Korea is next is maybe other country, the US and the UK. So never happened such change by ourselves.
If we go back to your comment about, how founders are really important and, we need to learn from big companies in China that have like a startup mindset, that flexibility, the agility, we need to learn from it. But do you think if reform is not in the culture of Japan or in the mindset of many Japanese people, do you think in terms of business too, it's very difficult to bring in reforms in business as well?
Okay, so but yes, of course, I believe. I believe this one is some of the culture difference. I think the US and the UK is the French people is Emmanuel taught. I'm not sure the English. So our family system is completely different. US and UK is parent is children is completely independent. But Japan is this was series. For example, children take care of their parents. Of course, the US is similar, but completely different such a family system. That case is US and UK maybe self reform is possible, but in case of Japan, it's difficult. But if something comes from other stuff, Japan is completely different style. Before World War II and the Meiji period, the last revolution, we completely changed the style A to B. This is Japanese culture. But we need the other people with some of the, small shocks from the other country.
I guess there's a pro and con to that. I guess you're a little bit safer. You can just take in other countries' sort of successes and learnings and takeaways from other cultures and other countries' successful achievements and incorporate it into your own sort of learnings.
Exactly.
And
it's very important.
So let me just introduce some comments. Hayato is saying Uber Eats will do well. And renewables and environment will do well as well. But maybe, George, can you touch upon like you already mentioned a little bit before, but what business areas, what industries do you think will find success in 2021 and beyond?
Oh, renewable worldwide? Oh,
Or Uber
yeah,
Eats
renewable. Okay, so I understand 2021 is, so far in case of Japan, still digital transformation is a measure of the change. But next is a renewable. This one is one of the, strategic points. And many countries, okay, so from the macro view, China and U.S. conflict is one of the big issue in the world. Japan is some of the center, not center, but affected a lot. that case is a renewables and such an environmental issue is a big competition, one of the big competition issue. So that case is this one is a very become popular in Japan too. Yeah.
So can you be a little more specific about what kind of businesses you actually mean? Like I sort of can imagine the term when I hear renewables, but in concrete terms, and especially in terms of Japan and Japanese businesses, what is being done?
Okay, first is one of the items, but Toyota is announced a solid state battery, solid state battery. So this one is very useful for the EV electrical vehicle. This is Japan is very good at this such material products. So this is one of the big industries. And renewable means, for example, other point is some biotechnologies. Yeah, this one is at first is solid state batteries maybe big point, and but the other renewable energies, Japan's practice is not so strong. But for example, in a biotechnology, still Japan has some power. And the other point is that I love the nuclear fusion. Nuclear fusion is now China is a top runner, and also Japan and Europe is collaborating. So that case is a two big point. Making energy and reserves energy. Two portions is maybe Japan has some of the, we have some new industry.
Okay, thank you for a bit of extra insight on that. All right. So sticking with this idea of Japan and sort of new economic endeavors, the last question I want to get to here is one that I think everyone has considered a lot and maybe come face to face with. In the event, or I guess once it happens that vaccines do end up distributed in Japan, how do you think that will affect the way work styles have changed? Will everything go back to the way it was 2 years ago, or in some capacity is remote working here to stay, or will there be something new that happens in the future?
So how will work styles kind of change post-COVID?
Yes, post-vaccinations.
Well, hopefully things won't go back to normal. As George said, maybe not just Japan, but I think a lot of industries and a lot of countries needed a little bit of a shock from the pandemic to speed up and accelerate not just DX, but basic work style reform. And we've seen a lot of change in Japan, even within our company, and I'm sure in George's company as well. So hopefully we can learn from, this shock that we had this past year, and maintain the acceleration of our growth and work style reforms. But at the same time, I can imagine, based on what I hear from friends who work for other companies in Japan, a lot of people are going back to work already. They're going back to the office, even in Tokyo. So I do see some hints and signs of things kind of going back to normal for some people. Yeah.
Okay. So beyond just the obvious remote work, and especially George, I'm curious to get your thoughts. What do you think are the most valuable things that should be continued in terms of changes in the workplace?
Okay, so I'm also the similar opinion. So everything do not do not work again. So in that case, most valuable point is leverage by the remote. So at first is for example overseas business trip. So that case is so before is that we need to go and just discuss in the back, and remote is supplement. But now is the one just face-to-face meetup, and the remote is mainly. So our communication style becomes completely changed, and our communication is but it's also the make a two big difference. So some people is completely enjoy new way, but some people completely behind. It will be happen. So some people is very good for the remote and original life. So both synergy they enjoy, but other people it's not. So it may be a big issue next time.
Okay, interesting take.
If I can just, sorry, ask
Yeah,
a
please.
follow-up question with that. What do you, how do you think companies that have found that synergy between remote working and traditional working, how do you think they were able to discover it? Or do you have any advice for companies or professionals watching right now who are struggling with that balance of remote working, traditional office working, and how to best leverage all of our learnings from the past year?
Okay, so basically, so I just want to say the one word is unlearning. Unlearning. So, of course, before we love to meet each other face to face, but we have known. So remote is also very good. That case, but many people still believe face to face is the best way to discussion. But we make a new concept, the leverage, as a synergy of the face to face and remote. That case, we need to unlearn and relearn. So, and the world is completely changed before and after COVID. That case, we unlearn the before and relearn the next future. But it's very difficult to most of people. So there is winner and loser is completely clear in next world.
Yeah, unlearning things. I mean, once you're past a certain age, like when I was in my 20s, I used to be so flexible with my mind and I would be able to absorb
Okay, you
new
are still
information.
young, no problem. Completely no problem. If you can't unlearn, I am still no learn. Or down. Everybody
Oh
can
my.
unlearn.
Well, we're getting towards
I'm
the
old
end of
guy.
our time today, but I want to finish with one question to everyone. What are you looking forward to in 2021? And this could be literally anything, macro, economics, personal, whatever you've got. So I'm actually going to go in kind of the reverse of the order we've generally been doing things. Raina, what are you looking forward to in 2021?
Oh, what am I looking forward to? Well, as George mentioned, I think chaos breeds innovation and new ideas. I think that it will remain to be a chaotic year, probably completely different from 2020. A different kind of chaos, I think, is brewing. So I'm looking forward to the new ideas that are going to develop, not just from me or from my company, but from other companies and from other people as well. So that's what I'm looking forward to.
Chaos coffee, good stuff. All right. Anna, what do you think?
It's an easy one for me. It's concerts. I haven't been to a concert in like 10 months.
A concert. Okay. Yeah.
This is extremely difficult for me. But also I haven't had much opportunity to kind of engage with online concerts or streaming concerts. So in a few months, I'll have a little bit more time and I'm looking forward to kind of investigating that world and maybe presenting a few concerts because it's very new for me. So that should be exciting.
That's exciting. Okay, fantastic. What's the first genre you will go to see live again?
Oh, that's a very good question. Something loud. Something very loud.
Good answer. Okay, Zia, what's your 2021 point of hope?
Yeah, I was trying to think about this, but I think it'll come maybe closer to the end of 2021. But there'll come a time, maybe a trickle or a gradual moment when we sort of all start being able to see each other again. And I maybe 2021, maybe 2022, but I'm looking forward to that. Like I miss people. So
yeah,
opening.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
like there'll be celebrations. It's going to be a fun time.
For work, I think remote working is really, it has changed it. But just for life, face-to-face communication, you can't beat that. And Hayato is mentioning that we will be losers if we cannot do remote, and I do agree. And we need to leverage the technology, as George says. But when it comes to, seeing your friends, seeing your family, nothing beats face-to-face. Yeah.
Yeah, that's for sure. All right. And last but not least, George, what do you think? What are you looking forward to most in 2021?
Yeah, so yes, I'm look, bright future. That is, because our government says, emergency declaration.
Yeah.
So from the 7th of the July, this one very sad. Well, again, so because this is this affects my company's revenue a lot. But to change my mind or to from the see for the out of the box, maybe this is a chance. So next year, 2021, no, this year is a I change my mind. Beyond the mindset is very important. So because to keep same mindset, maybe we are down, but just beyond myself, and to see the bright future.
That is very optimistic indeed. All right. Well, that just about brings us to the end of things today. Any final comments from anyone? Thoughts on the year that has been, the year to be? Any final horrible things you'd like to say about 2020 just to get it out there?
No, I think 2020 was, we all struggled to gain our footing, to find what we're supposed to do. But as George says, we know it now. We know the world. We're starting to get familiar with the chaos. So maybe it is time not just to maintain what we've been doing, but to, as George says, go beyond, go to the next step, next stage. Yeah.
Lovely. Anyone else? Final thoughts, comments, anything you'd like to share? Everybody good?
George, do you have any final comments for our participants today?
Yes.
Any words of advice?
Enjoy ourselves, because we just enjoy, the life is beautiful. Life is beautiful. So my pronunciation is bad, but we believe our life will be beautiful in this year. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely.
Could not say it much better myself. Well, I think that's a pretty hopeful note to end things on. To everyone joining us today, thank you all so much for coming and sitting through our various arguments with each other. To all of my panelists, thank you all for taking your time, and especially George for being our guest today. We know how busy you are now, so thank you very much for sharing a little bit of your very valuable time with us and a lot of your very unique and fascinating insights. And to everyone listening, congratulations on making it through 2020, and I wish you all the best in the year to come. Take care, have a good evening, and again, thank you all very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Bye.
Goodbye.